Godzilla Minus One. I think we can all agree that the recent Godzilla standalone movies, at least the American ones, were not anywhere near as good as they should have been. Now, granted, I did find myself enjoying Godzilla v Kong in 2021, but I'm not counting that here as a standalone Godzilla movie. And I've always heard that the Japanese Godzilla movies are the ones that hit the nail on the head, and well, I've only seen two, both the original 1954 Godzilla, which is of course a part of cinema history and a film I really liked, and then as well seen its 1955 sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, and that one I thought was just okay at best. Not enjoying it as much, and then I kinda fell off from bothering with the Japanese version of the King of the Monsters. Well, I decided to give Japan another chance this time around with Godzilla Minus One after hearing so much hype and raving reviews for it. And while my own opinion may not fully align with everyone else on that, I will say that it is a good and competent film. Minus One is essentially an alternative retelling of the 1954 original Godzilla film, showcasing the monster's very first encounter with humankind. This time, however, there's a human main character that we follow right from the very start all the way to the end named Kochi, a kamikaze pilot who abandons his post and is plagued by survivor's guilt, working as a minesweeper as he begins supporting a woman, Noriko, who walks into his life with an orphaned baby, Akiko. And that's something Minus One excels at, the human element, which is rather good, as no matter whether it's the main or side characters, you actually care about them, and that's important seeing as we essentially go through a majority of the film through Kochi's point of view. Now, I will admit that I missed the first 15 minutes of the film, the Odo Island sequence, but in doing so, I did manage to appreciate how the film does such a good job in retelling certain events, to the point where I didn't feel lost or confused at all. Another amazing thing to take note of here is the CGI, which is considerably really good, since apparently Minus One was made on a low budget of around 15 million, which is pennies compared to the American Godzilla movies. The CGI here, especially on Godzilla and his atomic breath, is simply brilliant and is no doubt one of the high points of the film, visually at least. Now, when comparing against other Godzilla films, or at least the ones that I've seen, there are some notable changes here, and the main one is how low scale this film felt, which honestly kinda disappointed me. Like, for example, there's only just one city rampage sequence in the film, and I'm so mixed about it. Not to mention, aside from one city district, farmland, and some ships, there really isn't much other damage done on screen. We also ditched the government and essentially have this film be the citizens versus Godzilla, which is kind of wild when you think about it. Doesn't really make sense, but the film doesn't care, attempting to brush this all away with a lame excuse, which I absolutely don't buy, that the Japanese government is nowhere to be seen, aside from one scene of the Takao battleship, which is arguably one of the best scenes in the entire film too. I can't understand how Japan's self-defense force wants to do nothing about Godzilla, nor the excuse on why the US doesn't want to help either, because they're afraid of creating tensions with the Soviet Union, which is honestly dumb. As for all they know, by not stopping this monster now, they run the risk of having their own nations and the world become a casualty by this unknown, radioactive giant creature that destroys everything in its path. Instead, the film seems more interested in being anti-government, criticizing the Japanese government whenever it can, and wanting to have a message of "screw the government. We the people can take out Godzilla ourselves," and sure, it's a neat idea, but it's not realistic. And seeing how this tries to be more of a grounded Godzilla film, at least compared to a lot of the other Japanese Godzilla films that are more fantastical, then this fails for me. I get you want to incorporate such a message, and I agree there were a lot of issues with Imperial Japan's government. But there are better ways going about it and still including them in the film for more than 5 minutes. Furthermore, there's a ton of mental gymnastics required during Noriko's scenes in the Ginza attack that seem out of place for this again. This so-called grounded retelling of Godzilla, due to how cartoony they can feel, and as such continues to pull me out of the film, especially with Koji's sudden teleportation being in the right place at the right time to find Noriko amongst the chaos right in front of Godzilla. Yeah, right, that is not happening. On the bright side, I did appreciate seeing a fresh new take on how to defeat Godzilla, rather than rehashing the same plan from the 1954 film. And the twist with Koji choosing to live, if not for himself, but for Akiko at the very end was nice. But at the same time, I feel the importance of that is played down right at the very end with the reveal of Noriko's survival, which, sure, I don't mind the happy ending, but I feel things would have felt more powerful had she stayed dead, you know? Plus, for a Godzilla movie, they're sure afraid of having a kill count where the main or even the side characters are concerned, as no one notable dies in this film, which also takes away from Godzilla's impact. Overall, I enjoyed Godzilla Minus One, but I found enough issues with it that it did taint the experience somewhat for me, such as the forced anti-establishment message, or the cartoony Act 2 making it far from an ideal perfect Godzilla flick. Also, like I mentioned before, it felt too small scale for my liking, as when you think of Godzilla, you don't think small scale, and sure, I know this had a small budget and what it did do was impressive, but I think it would have made more sense if the director, Ishirō Honda, had gone for another monster to make the movie on, or better yet, create his very own. Still, what we did get was sufficient, and there is still a lot of good in this movie here too. But I just wish there was more. And that's my take on Godzilla Minus One. If you've seen the movie yourself, then let me know in the comments below if you liked it, disliked it, or were somewhere in between, as I'm interested to hear where everyone stands on this movie. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel for movies, TV reviews, plus gaming and other entertainment content, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.